I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Azerbaijan to introduce an address by the head of state.
Mr. President, Mr. Secretary General, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I have the distinct honor and privilege to introduce the address of His Excellency, Mr. Ilham Heydar Aliyev, President of the Republic of Azerbaijan.
Mr. President, Mr. Secretary General, distinguished heads and states and governments, I congratulate the President of the 75th session of the General Assembly, Mr. Volkan Bozkır, on his election. We were delighted with the election of a representative of the brotherly Turkey to such a distinguished post. You can be sure that Azerbaijan will spare no effort in extending its support to you in this responsible and honorable endeavor. Almost 20% of the territory of Azerbaijan remains under occupation of Armenia for almost 30 years. Armenia used military force against Azerbaijan in brutal violation of the UN Charter and occupied Nagorno-Karabakh and 7 other regions of Azerbaijan. More than 1 million Azerbaijanis became refugees and internally displaced persons. Armenia carried out the ethnic cleansing against the Azerbaijani population in the occupied territories. All Azerbaijanis have been forcibly expelled from occupied territories. Armenia committed a number of war crimes and crimes against humanity against Azerbaijani civilians. Armenia established the criminal terrorist puppet regime in these territories to hide its responsibility for occupation of our lands. Armenia committed Khojaly genocide in 1992. 4 UN Security Council resolutions demand immediate, complete, and unconditional withdrawal of the Armenian armed forces from the Azerbaijani occupied territories. In some cases, UN Security Council resolutions have been implemented within days. However, Armenia continues to ignore the UN Security Council's resolutions for almost 30 years. International sanctions must be imposed on Armenia as an aggressor state. In blatant violation of the international law norms, Armenia implements a policy of illegal settlement on the occupied territories. The illegal settlement is a gross violation of international law, including the Geneva Convention of 1949. This is a war crime. The illegal settlement in the occupied territories of Azerbaijan cannot have any legal effect. Cultural heritage of Azerbaijani people on the territory of today's Armenia has been demolished and plundered. Armenia also destroyed all Azerbaijani historical and religious monuments in the occupied territories. The aim is to erase all Azerbaijani traces there. Armenia illegally exploits natural resources and uses water reserves to create an artificial environmental crisis in the occupied territories. Armenia extracts gold and other precious metals and minerals on the occupied lands of Azerbaijan and exports to the international markets. It's a scheme of illegal business activities and money laundering. International companies illegally exploiting Azerbaijan's natural resources on the occupied territories will face legal responsibility if they don't stop their illicit activity immediately. Azerbaijan has already started to take legal actions against persons and companies illegally exploiting our natural resources on the occupied lands. Armenia deliberately targets civilian population and perpetrates provocations along the line of contact and Armenia-Azerbaijani border. In April 2016, Armenia launched a large-scale military attack against Azerbaijan. As a result of this attack, 6 Azerbaijani civilians, including 1 child, were killed, 26 civilians were wounded. armed forces of Azerbaijan took countermeasures and liberated part of the occupied territories. Deliberate attack by Armenia in 2017 led to death of 2-year-old Zahra Guliyeva and her grandmother. On July 12, 2020, Armenia perpetrated another provocation along the state border. Our military servicemen and a 76-year-old civilian were killed due to the artillery bombardment of Azerbaijan's Tovuz district, while extensive damage was done to civilian infrastructure. However, Azerbaijan retaliated resolutely, and Armenia failed to achieve any of those objectives. Armenia faced another military defeat. Armenia appealed to ODKB, Collective Security Treaty Organization, for military assistance, thus admitting its defeat. Recently, Armenian sabotage group attempted to penetrate through the line of contact. The Armenian government turned down Azerbaijan's proposal to exchange all captives based on the principle all to all. Azerbaijani civilians Dilgam Askarov and Shahbaz Guliyev, who visited the graves of their parents in the occupied territories, were taken hostage and tortured. They remain in captivity for more than 6 years. The so-called elections this March on the occupied territories of Azerbaijan were yet another provocation. These so-called elections, like previous ones, were strongly condemned and rejected by the international community. Illegal presence of the armed forces of Armenia in the occupied lands of Azerbaijan remains a major threat to regional peace and security. Armenia tries to derail the peace process under the mediation of the OSCE Minsk Group co-chairs. The aim pursued by Armenia is to maintain the current status quo of occupation and to annex the occupied territories. Contrary to the constructive engagement of Azerbaijan, the Prime Minister of Armenia deliberately undermines the format and substance of negotiation process. His statement that Karabakh is Armenia seriously damaged the negotiation process. His unacceptable and groundless so-called 7 conditions to Azerbaijan have been rejected by us. We have put forward only one condition: to achieve the peace. The armed forces of Armenia must withdraw from all occupied territories of Azerbaijan. The entire world recognizes Nagorno-Karabakh as an integral part of Azerbaijan. The Armenian Prime Minister announced the establishment of civilian militia consisting of tens of thousands of civilians who will be forced to undertake military actions against Azerbaijan. The Minister of Defense of Armenia calls for new war for new territories. Armenia threatens Azerbaijan to strike major cities, critical civilian infrastructure, such as Mingechevir water reservoir and Sangachal terminal, which is one of the world's biggest oil and gas terminals, situated near Baku and providing energy security to tens of countries. Armenia recruits and uses mercenaries and terrorists from different countries against Azerbaijan. Armenia is a state sponsoring terrorism. Armenia committed more than 30 terror acts in Azerbaijan. We have credible information about the presence of Armenian Asala terror organization on the occupied territories. Armenian terrorists have killed 24 Turkish diplomats. Varuzhan Karapetyan, member of Asala terror organization, who committed a terror act killing many people of different nationalities in the airport Orly in Paris, later was extradited to Armenia and then pardoned by President of Armenia. This terrorist was treated as a hero in Armenia. Recently, Armenia has adopted its aggressive and offensive military doctrine and national security strategy. The national security strategy contains racist, chauvinistic, and Azerbaijanophobic ideas. The glorification of Nazism is a state policy of Armenia. Nazi General Garigin Nejde has been turned into national hero. Hostile Azerbaijanophobic statements and provocations of Armenian leadership demonstrates that Armenia is preparing for new aggression against Azerbaijan. We call on the UN and international community to urge Armenia to refrain from another military aggression. The military political leadership of Armenia will bear all responsibility for instigating provocations and escalation of tensions. Regretfully, the OSCE Minsk Group co-chair's activity has not yet delivered any results. Negotiations must not be conducted just for the sake of negotiations. They must be target-oriented and meaningful. Presidents of the OSCE Minsk Group co-chair countries, France, Russia, United States, in their statements stressed that the status quo is unacceptable. We welcome these statements, but statements are not enough. We need actions. All 11 members of Minsk Group should be actively involved in the process. In accordance with the UN Security Council Resolution 853, updated timetable for withdrawal of armed forces of Armenia from occupied territories of Azerbaijan must be prepared. The UN Security Council resolutions are not time-specific. These resolutions are valid until they are implemented. Misinterpretation of UN Security Council resolutions is unacceptable. The Armenia-Azerbaijan conflict must be resolved on the basis of the territorial integrity of Azerbaijan. Azerbaijan's territorial integrity has never been and will never be a subject of negotiations. The sovereignty and territorial integrity of Azerbaijan must be completely restored. Nagorno-Karabakh is ancient and historical Azerbaijani land. Karabakh is Azerbaijan. We are seriously concerned by increasing cases of arms supply to Armenia, especially right after the military provocation of Armenia in Tovuz district of Azerbaijan. Active military clashes at the state border stopped on July 16th. Next day, starting from July 17th until September, we witnessed delivery of more than 1,000 tons of military equipment to Armenia by military cargo planes. Taking into account that Armenia is one of the poorest countries of the world and cannot afford paying for weapons billions of US dollars, we assume that it gets weapons free of charge. We urge all countries to refrain from supplying arms to Armenia. Because of aggression against Azerbaijan, Armenia continues to face deep demographic, social, and economic crisis. Regime change happened in Armenia 2 years ago, but fascist ideology of this failed state remains unchanged. Human rights are massively violated in Armenia. Judges are pressured and blackmailed. Journalists, opposition activists, and political opponents jailed by despotic regime. In fact, a dictatorship has been established in Armenia. Criminal cases have been opened against 2 former presidents of this country. Meher Yegiazaryan, an Armenian journalist and politician, died in prison following hunger strike in January 2019. But there was no reaction from international organizations whose duty is to observe democracy and human rights worldwide. Human Rights Watch, Amnesty International, Freedom House, and others turned blind eye on unhuman and brutal actions of despotic regime of Armenia. The reason can be that Pashinyan regime is financed and supported by Soros, who sponsors many so-called human rights non-governmental organizations worldwide. Despite the enormous difficulties caused by Armenian occupation, Azerbaijan managed to build a stable, modern, democratic, and multicultural country. Development of democracy and human rights protection are among top priorities of our government. All fundamental freedoms are fully provided, including freedom of expression, media freedom, freedom of assembly, religious freedoms, as well as development of civil society. We launched broad political dialogue initiative several months ago. All major political parties supported this initiative. Azerbaijan's economy has developed rapidly and GDP tripled in the last 17 years. Poverty in Azerbaijan went down from 49 to 5% within 17 years. Over 3,700 schools have been built or completely renovated in Azerbaijan in the last 17 years. Azerbaijan ranks 54th among 166 countries in the Sustainable Development Goals Index, according to the Sustainable Development Report 2020. We have launched efficient measures to tackle the problem of freshwater shortage due to the climate change. Azerbaijan has ratified the Paris Agreement with a voluntary obligation to achieve a 35% reduction in greenhouse gas emissions by 2030, compared to the base year 1990. Multiculturalism is a way of life for the people of Azerbaijan. The UN General Assembly's resolution have recognized the World Forum on Intercultural Dialogue held in Azerbaijan every 2 years as a key global platform for promoting intercultural dialogue. The coronavirus pandemic has changed the situation in the world entirely. Thanks to measures undertaken by countries, situation with COVID-19 has remained under control. Our citizens' life and health is a priority for us, despite the economic difficulties it caused by the pandemic. The socio-economic stimulus package worth over $2 billion has been released to ensure economic stability, tackle unemployment issues, and ensure macroeconomic and fiscal stability. The social relief measures cover nearly 5 million people, which is half of our population. The World Health Organization named Azerbaijan an example in fight against pandemic. We have made voluntary contributions to the World Health Organization in the amount of $10 million. Azerbaijan has provided humanitarian and financial assistance to more than 30 countries with respect to coronavirus. With a unanimous decision of all 120 countries of a non-aligned movement, Azerbaijan was elected as the chair of this body. The non-aligned movement's extraordinary summit in response to coronavirus via video conference was held on our initiative in May 2020. During that summit, I suggested holding of the special session of the UN General Assembly in response to coronavirus at the level of the heads of state and government. International peace and security problems, the pandemic's impact on the countries of the world, call for solidarity between countries. I want to put forward several proposals to this end. The reforms with international organizations are particularly timely and essential in the post-pandemic period. The non-fulfillment of the Security Council resolutions undermines the prestige of the United Nations. Implementation mechanisms must be created for the UN Security Council resolutions. Refugees and IDPs have become the most vulnerable group of the pandemic period. The return of these vulnerable groups to their native lands in safety and dignity gains great urgency. Ensuring affordability and fair distribution of a vaccine is necessary. while the least developed countries should get it free of charge. Thank you for your attention.
On behalf of the General Assembly, I wish to thank the President of the Republic of Azerbaijan for the statement just made. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Zambia to introduce an address by the head of state.